If you haven't heard of Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. First of all, it's free. Completely free. I love free. I'm sure you love free. So that should be motivation enough. But the cool thing about it is, it allows you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. And you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. And now, back to the show. Enchanted Ink. Welcome to part 2 of our Greek mythology discussion. We're learning about the 12 Olympians and their powers in the context of the Percy Jackson series by Rick Riordan. So far, we've already covered Zeus, Poseidon, Dionysus, Ares, Athena, Demeter, and Hades in the last episode. So go back and give that a listen if you haven't already. Because today we're finishing up and talking about the other 6 Olympians. Not that they're any less important necessarily than their brothers and sisters. They just don't feature as prominently in The Lightning Thief. So we don't get to meet them or their demigod children until later on in the Percy Jackson series. So as a reminder, the campers at Camp Half-Blood are all demigods. They are the half-human children of the Olympians, including Percy Jackson, son of Poseidon. So at the camp, they are separated into different cabins depending on who their parent is. So the first 6 Olympians that we covered in the first part of this discussion are the main ones that Percy interacts with when he first comes to Camp Half-Blood. And the ones that we're going to cover today are not so much featured in Lightning Thief, but we do learn a lot more about them in later books. So let's start with Apollo. Apollo is the twin brother of Artemis and one of the most important Olympians. He's the god of healing, archery, oracles, music, poetry, and the sun. He was the leader of the 9 muses, the goddesses of art and music, and also the director of their choir. The god Hermes created the lyre for him, and the lyre is an instrument that looks very similar to an acoustic guitar, but it's rounded in the back. And so oftentimes in art, he's depicted as holding a golden lyre. Some fun facts about Apollo. One of his most important tasks was to harness 4 horses to his golden chariot and pull the sun across the sky every day. He's also credited with killing the Cyclops in retaliation for arming Zeus with the Master Bolt. And lastly, Apollo is the only god to carry the same name in Greek and Roman mythology. Next, we have Artemis, Apollo's twin sister. Artemis is the goddess of the hunt, as well as the moon, childbirth, wild animals, and chastity. She's usually depicted as a huntress, carrying a bow and arrow, and oftentimes accompanied by a stag. Some interesting things about Artemis are that she was the virgin goddess, and anyone who threatened her purity met a violent end. She's said to have spent most of her time roaming the forest with the forest spirits that she controlled, the nymphs and the dryads. So as a result, a lot of her shrines and temples were found in natural settings. And lastly, I thought this was very, very fascinating. She's worshipped now in neo-pagan religions as a triple goddess, or a goddess with 3 aspects. the maiden, the mother, and the crone. So that correlation is usually drawn to her Roman name, Diana, as one goddess with three aspects, but in the Greek tradition, Artemis, Selene, and Hecate make up the Trinity. That idea of the maiden, the moon in the Greek tradition, and the crone. And so that is a common thread that I think a lot of us are familiar with from various different religions and spiritualities, but you see it in Christianity with the Holy Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and here with these neo-pagan beliefs in the triple goddess. Our next Olympian, Hera, is the goddess of marriage and childbirth. She's the wife and sister of Zeus, which was apparently not that weird at the time. But even before her marriage with Zeus, she ruled over the heavens and the earth, which is the reason she's referred to as the Queen of Heaven, ruling over Mount Olympus, where all the gods and goddesses live, except Hades. There's actually not a ton to say about Hera. She's known for being jealous and vengeful, and most of her stories revolve around punishing and smiting people. She was always at odds with Zeus for his constant affairs, and she famously hated Hercules for being Zeus's son. But she was considered a protector of women and a punisher of unfaithful husbands. Next up is Aphrodite, goddess of fertility, love, and beauty. She's one of the most well-known Greek goddesses. Her beauty was said to be so legendary that a rivalry over her would cause a war among the gods. So Zeus, her father, married her off to Hephaestus, who we'll get to in a second. But despite her marriage, she was famously known for her many affairs, also very much like her father. But two of her most well-known affairs are her relationships with Adonis and with Ares, god of war. So the first interesting fact about Aphrodite is that the famous Venus de Milo sculpture is modeled after her. And actually, the vast majority of her depictions in fine art are of her nude, based on her powers and her persona. She is also the mother of Eros, aka Cupid. And lastly, this is a good one, Aphrodite, Athena, and Hera were the top three contenders for a golden apple to be given to the fairest goddess. The Prince of Troy judged the contest, and he chose Aphrodite as the winner, and that is said to be the real reason behind the Trojan War. So Zeus wasn't wrong. Aphrodite's beauty did cause a war. It just wasn't among the gods. Let's take a break, and when we get back, we'll learn about the final two Olympians.
This iTunes Top 5 album is out now.
I put a spell on you, yeah, 'cause you're mine.
Featuring epic brand new pop anthems and classic big band hits.
You won't admit you love me.
From me, British singer-songwriter Shane Hampshire.
Your side, let the rain fall down on me.
Search for Shane Hampshire's debut album, available to stream now.
Okay, let's talk about Hephaestus. He was the god of fire, blacksmiths, craftsmen, sculptors, and volcanoes. He was the blacksmith for the gods, responsible for all the weapons and furnishings of Olympus, including Cupid's arrows and Athena's sword. And, as we just mentioned, he was married to Aphrodite. So remember in The Lightning Thief when Ares sends Percy and his crew to go get his backpack, they get caught in a trap that Hephaestus designed to catch Ares and Aphrodite together to embarrass them. This is a scenario pulled directly out of the mythology, and apparently Hephaestus set traps like that for them all the time, on a regular basis. So, needless to say, he was not happy with the constant cheating between Aphrodite and Ares. Anyway, he's usually depicted in art working with an anvil and hammer. So some fun facts about him. In some accounts, he's said to be the son of Zeus and Hera. In others, he's just the son of Hera, conceived to get back at Zeus for having Athena. He's the only ugly god among all of the other physically perfect Olympians. He was apparently born deformed and walked with a limp, so for that reason, Zeus resented him and never really treated him well, and at some point banished him from Olympus. But he was known as a kind, peace-loving god and was primarily worshipped in Athens, where he had a temple. Oh, and he's the god of volcanoes because his workshop, where he created all of the Olympian weapons, was underneath a volcano. Last we have Hermes, god of travelers, messengers, medicine, and thieves. He's able to move freely between the mortal world and Olympus, thanks to his winged sandals, and he's often depicted as a bit of a trickster. So remember in the book, his son Luke tries to have Percy dragged down to the Titan Kronos using winged sneakers. Ultimately, it does not work because Grover is wearing the sneakers, but that is besides the point. All of that is a call out to Hermes and his famous winged sandals. So some highlights about him. He is the messenger of the gods. He's the only one besides Hades and Persephone who's allowed to come and go to the underworld without any consequence. And he's the father of Pan, god of nature, who is a satyr, half man, half goat, and the only Greek god to actually die. So remember, a big theme in the books for Grover is that as a satyr, he wants to become a searcher and go out and look for the god Pan because they don't believe that he's dead. Hermes is his father. So there we go. And yes, as far as I know, it is pronounced Hermes, unlike the fashion label. So that's that. And we've barely even scratched the surface of Greek mythology. There are a million other gods and heroes and creatures and stories, really, to cover. So you can definitely expect more episodes around this in the future. I'm not sure if we'll stick with Percy Jackson or explore other YA series that deal with the ancient Greeks, but Rick Riordan is honestly pretty thorough. The Lightning Thief is part of the Percy Jackson and the Olympian series, but there's actually a whole catalog of spin-offs, including Heroes of Olympus, The Trials of Apollo, and he actually also created a really fun companion book called Camp Half-Blood Confidential that takes an even deeper dive into the world of the books and the history of the gods. I think what I appreciate the most about them is that they make all of this so approachable for a younger audience. I love the idea of 12-year-olds being able to rattle off in minute detail all of the different attributes of the ancient gods. Riordan mentions in interviews that his inspiration for Percy Jackson was his son, who was dyslexic and had trouble reading and really didn't enjoy it. So he wanted to create something fun and interesting to help his son learn to love reading. And in that process, he created a generation of mythology lovers. Now, like a lot of other popular YA series, there was an attempt to create movies based off of these books. And to be honest, they weren't the worst thing I've ever seen, but they weren't great. So imagine my surprise and my optimism to hear that now that Disney has acquired 21st Century Fox, they will be adapting the Percy Jackson series into a live-action series on Disney+. So rather than trying to create standalone movies and dealing with those time constraints, they will be turning the books into ongoing episodes. And I, for one, am pretty excited about it. After seeing what they've done with The Mandalorian, at least, it gives me some kind of hope that as a series, Percy Jackson will be developed and given the care that it very much deserves. So we will most certainly be talking about that when they are available and ready to stream. But for right now, let's all collectively keep our fingers crossed that they turn out okay. So that's part 2 of our Greek mythology discussion. If you like the show and want to hear more, be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you like to listen. And make sure you leave a review so Enchanted Ink can rise in the rankings. If you have any questions, comments, or just want to chat, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Enchanted Ink Podcast and on Twitter at Enchanted Ink Pod. And don't forget to check out our home on the web, enchantedinkpodcast.com. See you next time.